Hey, how are ya? Max Charleroi here, aka MissedThePart, and welcome back to another idea to reality, where I break down certain scenarios and dive into the initial reception of the what if, and I go over why I do what I do on this channel as a writer. And in this particular episode, we're going to be diving into an episode that isn't really known on the channel, and that is, what if Spider-Man had the Venom symbiote in Spider-Man 2002? So let's dive right into the brand new video. Peter had gone on a science trip and had gotten bitten by a radioactive spider while he was taking pictures. This altered his chemistry and gave him powers of that of a spider. Testing his newfound powers, he decided to enroll in an underground fight contest for the money, which he won but was shortchanged by the organizer. In anger, he allowed a robber who had looted the organizer of his money escape later that night. Eventually, this decision was regretted when he found out that the said robber had killed his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Peter, who began working for the Osborns after he was adopted by Norman and refused to go back to school due to his emotional wreck. There he discovered the Venom symbiote, which merged, which altered his normal Spider-Man function. Peter had been on a bloodthirsty quest to avenge the demise of his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. The night his suit was amped up, he found the killer, and he recouped the murder. Peter spiraled down a well of anger and lack of control, and realized too later, after he had killed Norman and Harry, and eventually Mary Jane. He killed himself to stop the guilt, and he tried to kill the symbiote, which still survived. The what if was essential to the highlight to the remarkable changes that would have occurred if Peter had encountered the symbiote earlier than he did. When Peter encountered the symbiote, he had matured in age, in skill, and in emotional balance. Therefore, it was easy for him to realize when grievance hurt, even emotionally, had occurred, which gave him a hint that it was time to rid himself of the clutches of the Venom symbiote. However, when writing this, having his young, brash, and untrained self handle of such immense power and emotional unraveling, it was necessary to portray how it would affect his life, whether he would survive the turmoil or not, and to give a silent acknowledgement to the growth process he had undergone in the main trilogy. Another reason for the what if was to bring the life of Peter without the one pillar that he always had, and that would be Aunt May. In the main timeline, Peter had Aunt May to lean on after the death of his uncle. Although he loved her, he moved out of her home because of several reasons. This caused a level of loneliness in Aunt May, who was still going through grief. However, losing his two loved ones, his pillars, at once, was an emotional wreck, and it was surely enough to hit him off his trajectory. It was one of the essence of the what if to show how his life would be different around crime, and how bad decisions without Aunt May could occur. Furthermore, writing this was really interesting because the essence of the what if was to create a face-off between Norman Osborn and Peter in the symbiote suit. In the third installment of the movie, Peter got the symbiote merged with his costume. However, Norman Osborn had died previously. Peter only got to duel Harry Osborn and not the original Green Goblin. Therefore, it was necessary to pair the duo in order to test their resilience against each other. For most, it may have seemed unnecessary because Peter, without his instinct to kill, had still outwitted Norman in the first installment. However, Peter was only combating with Norman as at that time of the face-off, but in this fanfiction, Peter was having an internal battle with the symbiote, which is considerably a great distraction which Osborn could have exploited. certain characters other than the central character had significant value and aided in the furtherance and development of the plot. Also, this would serve as an analysis of the importance of the said character to the what if. Venom. It is arguably whether Venom is a character in the what if. However, he was one, as he is a symbiote, capable to moving and attachment. However, it is most important to know why Venom, out of all the villains, had been brought backwards to an earlier date other than when it first invaded Earth and used as a major character. Venom as an alien symbiote, which attaches itself to its host and capitalizes on their emotional imbalance, was one of which was necessary in the plot of this what if, which was towing the line of emotional hurt. After Peter lost his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, it was evident that the amount of grief Peter would feel would be gargantuan. Therefore, it was necessary to use such villain which would capitalize on this emotional imbalance and rawness to create something out of it. Other villains would serve as a way out from the grief. Peter would force himself and most probably later enjoy the said act of fighting villains because it would aid in escaping the pangs and hurt. On the contrary, Venom would mount the emotional hurt and ride it like a horse till the host would mentally accept the merger or try hard to fight it off till it did. Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn was a severe pillar in the storyline, but he failed. After Peter was adopted by Norman, he subsequently quit being schooled and decided to work under Norman. This provided him with much needed access to the Venom symbiote. The father figure which was once in his life was that of Uncle Ben. After his demise, Peter needed someone else to look and cater for him, and Norman Osborn chose to fill in the gap. However, Norman couldn't, because of the fact that he clearly wasn't a good father to Harry as well, due to the amount of subsequent ignorance of the boy, due to the work, and the fact that Harry was not in par with his expectations. It was obvious he loved Peter more, but even with that love, Norman wasn't a pillar for Peter, because he wanted a legacy, somebody that could easily carry on from where he stopped. He wanted to train Peter to be like him, since he couldn't do that to Harry. Peter couldn't emotionally rely on him. He didn't even like him that well. Hence, why he was able to switch to intense distaste when he found out what Norman had done to his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Also, Norman, who in this alternate personality of Green Goblin was a sign that Peter was looking for emotional support in the people who he would later cause his downfall. He had tried to seek it through Venom and then Green Goblin before he became the villain. It was a poetic twist that needed to be achieved, and that's why I really wanted to do that within the what if scenario. Other than the characters, certain events hold imminent significance, even though they seemed slightly betrayed. One of the major events was the last battle scene with Green Goblin. This scene displayed the internal battle Peter had with his morals and how he was unprepared, and that he was still young of age from getting his powers. Peter combated with the Green Goblin, initially relishing the thrill and the immense power he had gotten from the symbiote. However, when the symbiote started infecting him with murderous thoughts, Peter's morals kicked in. After he eventually lost the battle of morals due to the symbiote and killed the Green Goblin, who was taunting him. He ended up catching his glider and broke it off and stabbed him in the gut. The last battle transpired to his son Harry, who had witnessed the murder. Peter had to kill him too. It was outside the exercise of his independent will. Peter realized at this point that he was spiraling out of control, and he clamored to stop before he hurt the one other person which was there, Mary Jane. Although he had said it was the suit, it was still believable to doubt his intention. However, when he finally killed Mary Jane too, as the symbiote's self-defense against her raised gun, the weight of his decision hit him. The last fight scene was the reality check, the end of everything for him. It represented the end of everything he loved and everything that loved him equally, and showed him the consequences of bloodlust rage. Peter learned in this storyline, but in his death. When Peter let the robber go, this was more of a problem for Peter. He had an emotional problem. Peter having his powers was meant to do some good and stop people like the robber who had robbed the organizer of the underground battle of his money. But due to Peter's annoyance at the organizer for being cheated, he let him run by it without stopping him. This was a foreshadow that Peter's emotional instability would cause him to lose something greater, and that's why I really wanted to write that, if it rained unchecked. The same robber, if he had stopped him, would have not killed his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. However, it happened, and his rage yet again led him to kill every person he held dear. Another major event was when Peter found the robber. This was where he was face to face with the choice of which road to take, the high one and let the killer live, or the low one and execute him. Peter had been determined to cause harm to the robber and only got more angry when the robber spoke about whom had hired him. Peter killed him accidentally when the tendrils from the symbiote pierced through him. This scene was important because it was where Peter realized the gravity of what he was dealing with, the moral weight of what his suit had merged with. This gave Peter another choice of removing the suit, but Peter chose to keep it. This was to display that even though he had mixed feelings about the murder, he was justified about it and accepted the repercussions. Other than the route I had followed in the What If, there are other routes I could have taken. Due to the fact that Peter was working in a lab where he discovered the symbiote, it would have been possible to cause an initial resistance between Peter and the symbiote, which would have caused Peter to become frantic and try to rent the symbiote off of him. This would lead him to him repeatedly slamming himself again, glass-covered shelves containing chemicals which would have intertwined and counter-affected the chemistry of the symbiote, making it transferable. If this occurred, it would be easy for Peter to share the symbiote, but it would be unknown to him. All he had to do was stab them with tendrils of the symbiote. They remained alive long enough for the change to occur. This would have caused him to end up inadvertently infecting the robber, who wouldn't have died from the drop. After the infection of the robber, Peter would have a new villain on the ground, another Venom. It would provide a Venom against Venom scene, and Peter, with his moral values, would have to tame the wildness of his symbiote, just so that he could combat and subdue that. This would be different from the main movie, Venom, where Eddie Brock had the symbiote, because in this fiction, Peter's symbiote would combat with an equal version of his symbiote in another person, which would have developed its own mind. This would cause him to lose focus on his vengeance for Norman and focus on the annihilation of the other symbiote. With the infected robber, who would become a worse robber, as he would be able to develop powers and deem himself invincible. He would end up infecting other people, and this is where it becomes a massive problem, because you could have a Web of Shadows storyline with each person infected. That person would infect another, and there would be an apocalypse where it could actually get to Green Goblin. So it would be very interesting to see what would happen. Again, this is another take that I could have gone. But again, that's why I wanted to make this video. But that being said, my fellow watchers, what did you think of this breakdown series, where we go over different scenarios, we talk about different things and break them down into digestible bites, because I think it's such a good way to get people on this channel. Again, I do want to give a massive community shout out to a bunch of random people who have commented on these particular episodes. So if you see your comment, and you would like to comment more, or if you would like to see a feature, I would highly recommend that you comment in the brand new videos, because we will be doing breakdown series on brand new episodes. So if you have something to say that you want it to be featured in a segment, we will be doing that. But that being said, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and have a fantastic day. Peace out.